The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Carl Jung betrayal. It is a word that trembles on the lips of every soul that has ever known trust. It comes not from the stranger, but from the one who once held our hand, whispered their truths, or stood by us when the world grew dim. Betrayal is not merely an action. It is an earthquake of the psyche, a sudden break in the bridge between hearts that once beat in rhythm. There is something ancient and haunting in the sting of betrayal. It wounds not only the heart, but the archetypal foundation of the self. It ruptures our faith in the other, and in turn in ourselves. It is the collapse of the mirror through which we once saw a reflection of shared humanity. Carl Jung, the famed Swiss psychologist, did not treat betrayal as a mere wound of morality. He saw it as an eruption of the unconscious, a shadow rising to consume the illusion of harmony. To be betrayed is to be pulled into the underworld, where the masks fall and the truth behind appearances is revealed. But this underworld, like the one Orpheus once descended into, is not a place only of death and despair. It is also the place where one retrieves the soul, where one meets the forgotten pieces of themselves, where alchemical transformation begins. In this journey, we will walk with Carl Jung through the labyrinthine corridors of betrayal, its origins in the psyche, its archetypal role in human relationships, and its uncanny ability to awaken something greater than pain. Wisdom. Prepare yourself, for what is to follow is not a tale of justice or vengeance. It is a tale of awakening, of falling inward into the abyss, only to rise with clearer eyes and a more resilient heart. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Carl Jung betrayal is not born in a vacuum. It rises from deep within the human soul, hidden behind masks of affection, loyalty, and virtue. When someone betrays us, we often ask, "Why did they do this to me?" But seldom do we turn the mirror around and ask, what part of the human soul is capable of this? And could it live in me as well? Carl Jung's work on the shadow speaks to this unacknowledged aspect of our being. The shadow is not merely evil. It is everything we reject, everything we fear, and everything we do not wish to see in ourselves. And betrayal, cold, calculated, or even passive, often arises from that very repression. Each of us holds the capacity to betray, not because we are malicious, but because we are fragmented. We suppress desires, anger, needs, and even envy, and what is not made conscious emerges in distorted ways. The one who betrays is often someone who has betrayed themselves long before they harmed another. They lost their center, their truth, their responsibility to their own inner life, and so they lash out, abandon, deceive. It is tempting to see the betrayer as the enemy. But in Jungian thought, the true enemy is unconsciousness, the refusal to face one's own moral complexity, the unwillingness to suffer the pain of integration. And so, betrayal is often not premeditated, but inevitable, a byproduct of a soul divided against itself. This is why betrayal hurts so profoundly. It reminds us that the person who harmed us is human, and that we too are not immune to that same human frailty. The one who betrayed us may not even understand the wound they've caused, because they themselves are lost in a fog of self-deception. To understand betrayal is to walk into the shadow, not just of others, but of oneself. And it is in that recognition, painful as it may be, that healing becomes possible. Not through blind forgiveness, but through conscious integration of the reality that the betrayer is not some foreign invader, but a dormant potential that sleeps within the archetypal human soul. Every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol, morphine, or idealism. Carl Jung, why does betrayal leave such a lasting wound? Why do we carry its sting long after the moment has passed? It is not simply the breaking of trust that hurts. It is the shattering of innocence. Innocence, in Jungian terms, is not the absence of sin, but the absence of awareness. It is the untested belief that others will mirror our loyalty, that love means safety, and that those closest to us are incapable of harm. It is the childlike belief that if we offer our soul to another, they will protect it. But betrayal awakens us, brutally, suddenly. It forces us to see the world not as we wish it to be, but as it truly is, nuanced, divided, unpredictable. We no longer see with the eyes of a child, but with the vision of someone who has suffered. This transition, from innocence to experience, is one of the most defining shifts in a human life. It is a death of sorts, a death of the ideal. And like all deaths, it is accompanied by grief, denial, and eventually rebirth. Jung spoke of individuation, the process by which a person becomes whole, integrated, real. Betrayal, though agonizing, serves this process. It burns away illusions. It reveals the unconscious contracts we held with others. I will love you if you never harm me. I will stay loyal as long as you remain perfect. These unspoken bargains, when broken, reveal our hidden dependencies. And so, betrayal invites us into a deeper relationship with truth. It does not ask us to become cynical. It asks us to grow up, not in bitterness, but in clarity. To love, not blindly, but wisely. To offer our hearts, not as beggars seeking approval, but as sovereign beings who know that love is always a risk. This is the gift hidden within the wound. Not the comfort of restored trust, but the power of awakened discernment. A soul that has been betrayed and survived it is no longer innocent, but it is no longer naive either. It sees clearly. It loves deeply. And it walks with the sacred knowledge that light must be guarded. And that not every hand that reaches for us does so with care. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. To truly understand betrayal, one must understand the invisible contracts that bind human beings together. Not the spoken agreements, but the ones forged in silence, in need, in fear, in hope. When two people come together, they are not merely joining hands, they are exchanging unconscious expectations. You will make me feel safe. You will love me without condition. You will rescue me from myself. These silent demands are rarely examined, and yet they guide the relationship like an invisible puppeteer. And betrayal often occurs when one of these unconscious contracts is broken. Not because it was violated, but because it was unsustainable from the beginning. Jung believed that projection is the root of most interpersonal suffering. We project our inner world onto others, our unmet needs, our unloved parts, our divine longings. And the moment the other fails to fulfill that role, we feel betrayed not by them, but by the image we placed upon them. This is why betrayal can feel so personal. Because it is, but not in the way we think. It is not about what the other has done. It is about the collapse of a psychic structure we built within ourselves, a structure we mistook for reality. In this light, we are not merely victims of betrayal. We are participants in it. We entrust others with our unlived lives. We invest them with our unhealed wounds. And when they falter, as they inevitably must, we are confronted with the emptiness we hoped they would fill. This is not to blame the betrayed, but to awaken them. To see that the pain is not only the loss of the other, it is the exposure of our own dependence. A dependence that Jung would say must be withdrawn and reintegrated into the self. Only when we reclaim our projections do we begin to see others as they truly are, not as gods, not as demons, but as flawed, beautiful, and fallible human beings. And in that seeing, we free them, and we free ourselves. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Carl Jung. Throughout history, betrayal has marked the turning points of empires, religions, and revolutions. And yet, perhaps no figure encapsulates its archetypal power more than Judas Iscariot. Judas was not a villain in the modern sense. He was a man torn between belief and disillusionment, between devotion and inner conflict. His kiss, delivered in Gethsemane, was more than a sign to Roman soldiers. It was the collision of idealism with inner dissonance, a moment where the shadow rose not as chaos but as necessity. Jung interpreted religious figures and stories as archetypes, not fixed characters but reflections of inner psychic realities. Judas, in this light, is not merely a betrayer of Christ. He is the betrayer within us all, the part that turns against the very thing we once believed in, the part that cannot reconcile ideal and reality, the part that must destroy the image in order to survive the truth. Betrayal often appears not as hatred, but as disillusionment. The lover who cheats may not have stopped loving. Their betrayal may arise from an inability to reconcile their internal fractures. The friend who abandons may not hate us. They may be running from something within themselves, as Judas did, and yet betrayal always leaves a wound. In Christianity, the betrayal of Judas becomes the catalyst for the crucifixion, an act of suffering that paradoxically leads to redemption. In Jungian psychology, betrayal is much the same. It is crucifixion of the illusion, the death of the fantasy, but also the beginning of individuation, the becoming of a whole self. To contemplate Judas is to realize that betrayal is not always the enemy of transformation. Sometimes it is its beginning. Without the wound, the deeper self would never awaken. Without the fall, the truth would remain hidden. And so, in the echo of ancient betrayal, we find a pattern, a dark necessity, a painful initiation, one that has repeated through kings and commoners alike, because it lives not in history books, but in the human heart. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Carl Jung. What if betrayal is not only something done to us, but something that reveals us? The pain of betrayal often leads us to blame, to cast the betrayer as monster, as predator, as deceiver. And perhaps, in part, they are. But the deeper truth, the one Jung compels us to confront, is that betrayal acts as a mirror. It shows us who we truly are beneath the masks we wear. When someone betrays us, what is it that we feel? Anger, yes. Grief, certainly. But beneath these, there is often shame. The shame of having trusted too much. The shame of not seeing it coming. The shame of our own needs laid bare. Betrayal humiliates the ego. It shows us how vulnerable, how dependent, how fragile our image of self has been. This is the mirror betrayal holds before us. It reflects not only the flaw in the other, but the fracture in ourselves, our longing to be chosen, our fear of abandonment, our illusion of control. And through that reflection, something deeper emerges, the opportunity to integrate what was once denied. In Jung's terms, this is the confrontation with the anima or animus, the inner opposite we have projected outward. When those projections collapse, when the illusion dies, we are left only with ourselves. It is here that transformation begins. This is the dark alchemy of betrayal, the turning of pain into wisdom, the burning of identity so the soul can rise. Like the Ouroboros, the serpent that consumes itself to be reborn, betrayal devours our illusions to return us to something more authentic. So we must ask, what did this betrayal show me about myself? What illusions did I cling to? What parts of my soul did I outsource to another, only to find them returned in shards? This is not about blame, it is about reclaiming power, not over others, but over our unconscious life. Because betrayal, when met with consciousness, does not have to end in bitterness. It can become a mirror in which we finally see ourselves, not as victims, but as whole. The person you call your enemy is an aspect of yourself. Carl Jung, to understand betrayal, we must enter the mind of the betrayer, not to excuse, but to perceive. For the betrayer is not born wicked. They are often weak, fragmented, divided within themselves. Their betrayal is not an act of strength, it is an act of collapse. Jung believed that the unintegrated psyche was vulnerable to possession by unconscious forces. When a person lacks awareness of their shadow, the parts of themselves they deny, repress, or ignore, they become puppets of that very darkness. The betrayer, in this sense, often betrays not because they want to, but because they cannot face themselves. They betray to escape responsibility, escape the truth, escape the prison of their own contradictions. They may lie to themselves first before lying to you. They may create elaborate justifications, narratives, and moral acrobatics to soothe their conscience. But beneath it all, their psyche is crumbling under the weight of denied truth. This is why betrayal is often followed by silence, avoidance, or emotional distance. The betrayer is ashamed, but shame, unprocessed, does not lead to remorse, it leads to further deception. In this way, betrayal becomes a chain of unconscious acts, a spiral of avoidance that can only be broken by radical honesty. And yet, not all betrayers are overtly malicious. Some betray by withdrawal, others through denial. Some betray through convenience, the path of least resistance, and some betray because they do not yet know who they are. In betraying others, they are merely echoing the betrayal they have inflicted upon their own soul. Jung would tell us, do not be quick to judge, but do not be naive either. See clearly. Understand that the betrayer is not a devil. They are a mirror of all that is unconscious within the human heart. They are what happens when the shadow rules the soul. But you, the betrayed, have a choice: to remain stuck in the pain or to rise above it. To turn this understanding into armor, not to harden your heart, but to protect its depth. In knowing the betrayer, you learn the terrain of the unconscious. You become wiser, stronger. You gain the eyes to see not just who others are, but who they are capable of becoming, and who you must choose to be. Every human life contains a potential. If that potential is not fulfilled, then that life was wasted. Carl Jung, trust is not a contract. It is a sacred offering. To trust another is to hand them the most vulnerable part of your soul, to say, I believe you will protect this. It is not given lightly, at least not by the wise. But even the wise can be wounded. What happens then when trust becomes a burden for the other? When they crumble under the weight of your belief in them. This is a truth rarely spoken. Some betray not because they despise you, but because they cannot carry the image you have built of them. The more idealized a person feels, the more pressure they experience to uphold an illusion. And eventually, they fall, not from malice, but from suffocation. Jung wrote about the burden of the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world. Many of us wear masks to be accepted, to feel loved. But when someone loves the mask and not the self, it becomes a prison. And so, betrayal may be an unconscious attempt to shatter that mask, to destroy the illusion so the self may finally breathe. Does this justify betrayal? No. But it reveals its root, the terror of being unseen, even in love. The fear of never being truly known, the silent agony of performing for affection. In this way, betrayal becomes not just the fall of trust, but the death of an ideal. we realize that the person we loved was not who we imagined, that our own projections danced more vividly than their reality. And in that death, there is grief, not only for the relationship, but for the dream we held. Yet Jung would remind us this is not the end. It is the beginning of seeing. The end of fantasy is the beginning of reality. And reality, though colder at first, is far more solid. You cannot build a soul on illusion, but you can build one from clarity. To see another as they truly are, not as you hoped they'd be, is painful, but it is also freeing. It allows you to love not from need, but from truth. It teaches you that trust must be given not to perfection, but to presence. And in that awareness, betrayal no longer defines you. It refines you. There is no light without shadow and no psychic wholeness without imperfection. Carl Jung, when betrayal strikes, it tears through the psyche like a storm. The winds of confusion, the rain of grief, the lightning of rage. And yet, once the storm passes, something strange occurs. Stillness. That stillness is not peace, not at first. It is numbness, emptiness. The terrain of the soul feels foreign. The world, once familiar, is now stripped of meaning. And here, in this desolate space, the alchemy begins. Alchemy, in Jung's psychology, was never about turning lead into gold. It was the symbolic journey of transformation, the death of the false self, the confrontation with the shadow, the rebirth of the soul. And betrayal, more than almost any experience, serves as the prima materia, the raw material for that transformation. Pain becomes the fire, reflection the crucible, and through that burning, what was fragmented begins to find shape. You begin to see the patterns, the unconscious choices, the way you clung to safety, to illusion, to people who could not hold your depth. You could not blame yourself, but you begin to see yourself. And in that vision, you recover the pieces once lost in others. This is the golden path of individuation, the slow, often agonizing process of becoming whole. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be faked. It demands that you walk through the valley, not around it. Yet in that valley, you begin to hear something ancient, a whisper beneath the pain. The voice of the self, not the ego, not the mask, but the eternal core of your being. And it says, this was not the end. This was the fire that forges. Slowly you rise, not as you were, not as the wounded, but as the one who has seen into the depths and did not drown. You may never thank the betrayal, but you will understand its role. It broke what was false. It revealed what was fragile. And it prepared the ground for something stronger to be born. Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. Carl Jung, after betrayal, there is a silence that follows, a vast, echoing solitude. It is not the absence of people, but the presence of a new awareness that few can understand. You have seen behind the curtain. You have touched the raw nerves of truth. And now you walk among others not with bitterness, but with depth. You have become more discerning, less willing to speak when the soul is not heard, less eager to trust what glitters without substance. This solitude is sacred. It is the chrysalis after the collapse, the temple where the ego bows and the soul listens. And yet it can be frightening. The old comforts no longer soothe. The old conversations feel hollow. You are not the same. The self you once were has died. And the new self is still forming, uncertain, quiet, slow. Jung spoke of the necessity of solitude, that in order to meet the self, one must retreat from the noise. Not in isolation, but in inner silence. The betrayed soul must learn to sit with its own echoes, to hear the stories it once ran from. In this silence, clarity blooms. You begin to see who truly loves you, who listens with depth, who stands not beside your mask, but beside your soul. And slowly a new circle forms, a circle forged not by comfort, but by consciousness. This is the paradox of awakening. It makes you lonelier at first, but more connected in the end, not connected to crowds, but to truth, not to noise, but to essence. And in this solitude, you do not wither. You deepen. You become the witness of your own becoming. You begin to walk, not toward others, but toward yourself. And that path, though narrow, leads to wholeness. You are no longer simply the betrayed. You are the awakened, the one who walks alone but no longer lost. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate. It oppresses. Carl Jung, the most dangerous consequence of betrayal is not pain. It is blindness. Many, after being betrayed, seal themselves in armor. They build walls, close their hearts, and look at the world with suspicion. But this is not discernment. It is fear in disguise. It is trauma masquerading as wisdom. Discernment is not the refusal to trust. It is the ability to see. It is the soul's capacity to perceive with depth, to observe without projection, to sense truth beyond appearances. And betrayal, when integrated, sharpens this ability like a blade forged in fire. No longer do you fall for charm without character. No longer do you mistake intensity for intimacy. You recognize the masks others wear because you once wore them too. You feel the tension beneath their smiles, the unspoken motives behind their kindness. But discernment does not condemn. It understands, it watches. It speaks with clarity, but not cruelty. It sees the complexity of others and oneself. Jung would say the more shadow you've met in yourself, the more light you can carry. Because you no longer need others to be perfect. You only need them to be real. And if they cannot offer that, you walk away, not in anger, but in self-respect. This is the birth of inner authority. You do not seek validation. You do not plead for love. You embody worth, and with each step you become more sovereign. The betrayed soul, when awake, becomes a guardian not of suspicion, but of truth. Not a cynic, but a sage. And in that role you hold space for a deeper world. A world where trust is earned, not assumed. Where presence is valued above performance. Discernment is the gift hidden inside betrayal. A compass made of pain, now aligned with truth. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. Carl Jung betrayal does not only wound the heart, it shatters the narrative the ego holds dear. The ego survives by storytelling. I am this kind of person. They would never hurt me. I know who I can trust. It needs stability, structure, predictability. But betrayal is the wild wind that tears down these walls. And so when we are betrayed, the ego suffers its death. We question our identity, our choices, our instincts. We ask, how could I have let this happen? But beneath that question lies a deeper one. Who am I now that the story has collapsed? This collapse is terrifying, but it is also holy. For the self is not fixed, it is fluid, emergent, eternal, and Jung taught that the ego must surrender if the deeper self is to rise. The pain of betrayal humbles the ego. It tears down pride, fantasy, and illusion, and in their place silence. From that silence, a new self can emerge. One that no longer clings to old roles, one that does not define worth by being chosen. One that does not fear solitude, nor worship belonging. You are not the victim in someone else's story. You are the author of your own. And when the pen is reclaimed, the narrative changes. You no longer need to be seen as right. You need only be whole. This is liberation. Not from the world, but from the self that no longer serves you. Let the old story burn, let the ego weep. And from its ashes, let the self arise. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung, in ancient myths, the hero does not become whole through ease. They are betrayed, exiled, tested. They descend into darkness, face the monsters within, and emerge not unscathed, but awakened. Betrayal, in this sense, is not a detour. It is the path. You are not merely a person who was hurt. You are a soul on a journey through illusion, fight, or shadow, and truth. Betrayal is the moment in the myth when the hero is cast out, when the sword is lost, when the companions flee, when the gods fall silent. It is here that the transformation occurs. Not on the mountaintop, but in the underworld. In the silence after the scream. In the solitude after the breaking. And when the hero rises, they are not as they were. They no longer seek applause. They no longer chase belonging. They walk with the quiet strength of one who knows their soul. Jung saw life as a series of initiations. Not formal rites, but inner deaths and rebirths. And betrayal is one of the most potent initiations of all. It strips you bare. It forces you inward. And it invites you to meet the self, not as concept, but as truth. The myth is not over. You are still walking, still becoming, still emerging from the ashes. Let the betrayal become your threshold. Let the pain become your fire. And let your soul, tempered in sorrow, rise. The greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents. Carl Jung, when the dust settles and the storm retreats into memory, we are left with a haunting question. How do I rebuild? The answer is not in seeking revenge, nor is it in rushing to trust again. The answer is slower, quieter. It lies in becoming someone who no longer hands their soul to the world wrapped in desperation. You rebuild not by chasing wholeness through others, but by returning to yourself. You learn the language of your own heart. You discover your values, not the ones inherited or imposed, but the ones that rise from within like a flame that refuses to go out. You become intimate with your own silence. You learn to enjoy your own company. You no longer chase presence, you offer it. You no longer beg to be seen, you see yourself. Carl Jung taught that healing is not about perfection. It is about integration. It is about becoming the person you were meant to be, not the one others needed you to be. Betrayal, for all its pain, makes this journey possible. It shakes us awake. It peels back the false layers, and it reveals the truth. That truth is this: the only self that cannot be betrayed is the one that no longer betrays itself. You betrayed yourself when you ignored your intuition, when you silenced your doubts, when you accepted crumbs because you feared the hunger of solitude. And now you know better. Now you listen to the whisper before it becomes a scream. Now you honor your boundaries not as walls, but as sacred markings of your worth. Now you speak truth even when your voice trembles. You are not the same, you are wiser, not bitter, but discerning, not afraid, but aware, not broken, but reborn. Suffering is not an obstacle to be avoided, but a passage through which we become. Carl Jung grief has a rhythm. At first it howls, then it weeps, then it whispers, and finally it teaches. The grief of betrayal is sacred, is not weakness. It is proof that you loved, that you hoped, that you believed in the goodness of another. And while that belief may have shattered, it means something still breathes inside you. A longing for truth, for connection, for something real. That longing must not be abandoned. It must be refined. Jung would say that grace is not the absence of pain. It is what emerges when pain is no longer resisted. When we sit with it, learn its name. Grace is born when we stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What now?" What now that I have seen through illusion? What now that I no longer need approval to feel whole? What now that I walk with the memory of betrayal but no longer its burden? You may carry the scar but not the shame. You may remember the moment but not be ruled by it. And in that liberation you become something sacred. A soul touched by fire but not consumed by it. Grief becomes grace when it makes you softer and stronger. Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, their love is lacking. Carl Jung, to love again after betrayal is not weakness. It is courage of the highest order. It is easy to close the heart, to build walls so high that no pain and no love can enter. But Jung would say, that is not living. That is surviving. You are not here to survive. You are here to live, and to live is to risk. But now you risk differently. You do not offer your heart to just anyone. You offer it to those who earn it, not through charm, but through consistency. Not through flattery, but through depth. You walk into relationships with new eyes. You speak your truth early. You listen not only to words, but to energy. You notice patterns. You protect your peace. And you love not because you are incomplete, but because you are overflowing. This is the return, the mythic circle. From navity to pain to awareness, and back to love. But a love that is grounded, sovereign, true. The one who has faced betrayal and still chooses love is the strongest of all. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Carl Jung betrayal showed you something, didn't it? It showed you who they were. But more than that, it showed you who you are. It revealed your strength, your capacity to feel, to grieve, to endure. It showed you that you can be broken and still rise, that you can lose what you thought you needed and discover what you truly are. You are not the betrayal. You are not the pain. You are not the moment they left, or the words they said, or the silence that followed. You are the one who remained, the one who stayed, the one who faced the ruins and chose to build again. And in that mirror, you see not weakness, but power, not despair, but rebirth, not a victim, but a soul who has seen into the depths and chosen the light. This is your story now, a story of pain, yes, but also of becoming. If you have walked with this story, let it settle. Let it touch what it needs to touch. Let it move through you like rain through the soil. Betrayal will visit many in this life, but not all will rise from it with wisdom. You have that choice now. To reflect, to write your thoughts, to reclaim your voice, to speak your truth, not loudly, but with depth. And if this journey touched you, stay with it. Reflect on it, share it with one who needs it, and subscribe, not merely to this channel, but to your own unfolding, to your own truth, to your own becoming. Wisdom is not loud. It is not flashy. It is the quiet voice inside that says, "Now I see."